Mr. Taibbi, I introduced a letter that I led to X. Let's call it X now. That way we can know the difference between when Elon Musk took it over and before when it was Twitter. From November 21st. Have you read this?
No.
Well, do you think it would be problematic if X leaves up terrorist violence and propaganda in violation of the terms of service?
Terrorist violence or terrorist propaganda?
If it violates their terms of service, is it problematic?
Well, it depends on what the content is, but you know, they're a private company. They can do what they want with the content.
Aha! They're a private company and they can do what they want with the content. Do you think it's problematic that X would profit off of terrorist violence, propaganda, and content on their social media platform?
Well, first of all, just to go back to
No, just answer the question. I don't have time. Do you think it's problem if they profit off of it?
Well, if the company makes money doing what it does, I don't necessarily see a problem with that.
Okay, interesting. So let me just move on because you said the biggest concern, sir, I'm sorry, you said the biggest concern that you had from the Twitter files was the systematic flags for social media companies. Now, the Stanford EIP that you're talking about, I'm sure you are aware, has documented that the social media platforms to whom they flagged potentially problematic tweets took action on only 35% of them, and only 13% of them were removed. Mr. Shellenberger, you said the biggest problem, and let me just ask you, Mr. Taibbi, real briefly, you would agree that these flags, that the systematic flags that you saw were flags for a violation of the terms of service of the social media company, is that right?
Sometimes, but sometimes in the case of the instances like Congressman Massey, they were actually true information.
Well, that may be the case, but the flag was for a violation of the terms of service.
It's for their interpretation of a violation.
And then the social media company has to determine whether or not it is actually a violation of their terms of service. And in 87% of those flags, they were not removed. Mr. Shellenberger, in brief time, you said that the censorship, the biggest problem you have is the censorship that you talk about is election interference. Do you agree that Russia used social media, including Twitter, to interfere in the 2016 presidential election?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, we've also briefly, if I may, Mr. Chairman, just have the extra time that my colleagues have had. You've talked about the Hunter Biden laptop and how the FBI knew it existed. You are aware, of course, that the laptop, so to speak, that was published in the New York Post was actually a hard drive that the New York Post admitted here was not authenticated as real. It was not the laptop the FBI had. You're aware of that, right?
It was the same contents.
How do you know?
Because it's the same, I mean, it's
you would have to
CBS News
authenticate it to know it was the same
contents.
contents. You have no idea. You know hard drives can be manipulated.
Are you suggesting the New York Post participated in a conspiracy to construct the contents of the Hunter Biden laptop?
No, sir. The problem is that hard drives can be manipulated by Rudy Giuliani or Russia.
Well, what's the evidence that happened?
Well, there is actual evidence of it, but the point is it's not the same thing.
There's no evidence for it, so you're engaging in a conspiracy
I'm glad
theory.
you agree with me, Mr. Shellenberger, that transparency is the most important thing. And my last question for you is, do you think it would be transparent if Hunter Biden came to this Congress and testified in a public hearing, and more transparent than if he testified privately?
I mean, literally, I've never thought about that. I have no idea.
You don't know?
Literally never thought about that.
Is public testimony more transparent than private testimony?
Are you familiar with the First
Mr.
Amendment?
Chairman, I yield back.
The Congress shall take no action to abridge freedom of speech.
Yeah,
and that's what you just described.
Mr. Shellenberger, is 13% censorship still censorship?
Absolutely.
And the other 87% is what we call the chilling effect that the courts have long recognized that they engaged in. That is the problem.
There's a broad, by the way, part of the operation, Congressman Goldman, part of the operation was to change the terms of service. So you see them constantly trying to change the terms of service You see them, it was 35% of the URLs that were, this is according to EIP, were labeled, removed, or soft blocked. That's all forms of censorship. That censorship is not just removal.
But 65% were not. So how can the government be so coercive?
Does the First Amendment say that the government
for the course on government efficiency?
Does the First Amendment say the government can censor 35%?
Time of the gentleman has
They're not
expired.
censoring. They're flagging in the social media
recognizes
companies.
Under
the only
coercion.
35% of a First
Chair-
Amendment, or?
Chair
It's not the
recognizes-
First Amendment. It's the terms of service, as you said, and they are flagging it for the social media companies to make their own decisions. That is not the First Amendment. That is the terms of service.
We've just seen the
Congressman, you're an attorney. You know that 4 federal judges have already ruled that.
And I know that it's on appeal in front of the Supreme Court right now.
that debate was very constructive.
that was
I
fun.
think that got to the heart of the issue.